Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload, and you'll never miss a story again. The first time I realized something was wrong with my marriage wasn't because of a missing text, or a strange perfume, or even a late night out. It was because of a look. My wife, Jenna, had this expression she used to get when she saw me walk into a room, like she'd been waiting all day to see me. It was warm, unguarded, and it made the worst days better. But lately, that look was gone. It had been replaced with something else, something polite, but distant. One night, after she'd gone to bed early, I stood in the doorway just watching her sleep. I told myself maybe she was stressed from work, maybe it was just a phase. But deep down, I knew better. The change had been gradual. It started with extra hours at the office. She worked in marketing, so late nights for client meetings weren't unheard of. Then came the phone she guarded like a state secret. She'd take calls in another room, type out long texts while sitting on the couch, and angle the screen away without even thinking about it. I tried to brush it off, until one Friday evening, she came home in a rush. She barely said hello, just darted upstairs to change. When she came back down, she was wearing a dress I'd never seen before and the kind of perfume she used to save for date nights with me. "Going somewhere?" I asked. "Just dinner with some friends," she said, a little too quickly. "Which friends?" "You don't know them. New people from work." She kissed my cheek, a quick, distracted peck, and left before I could say more. I wasn't the jealous type, but that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us for good. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the clock, listening to the sound of the refrigerator humming, feeling the weight of silence in the house. She came home late. Too late. And her smile when she walked through the door wasn't for me. It was the leftover smile of someone who'd just been with another person. She didn't notice I was still awake. She went straight upstairs. I sat there for another hour before finally heading to bed. Over the next few weeks, the signs became impossible to ignore. The work trips that appeared suddenly on her calendar, the new password on her laptop, the way she'd come home glowing, then shower immediately. And the worst part? The way she looked at her phone and smiled, the same way she used to smile at me. Still, I didn't confront her. I didn't want a screaming match or an ugly scene. I wanted the truth. And if I was going to get it, I had to be patient. So I waited. I listened. I paid attention. The truth finally came to me in the most unexpected way. An email. Jenna had left her tablet in the kitchen one morning while she was upstairs getting ready for work. A notification popped up, not a message but a calendar reminder. Dinner, 7 p.m., The Pines, with Alex. The little heart emoji hit harder than the name. I didn't recognize Alex, but I didn't need to. I knew. I didn't open the tablet. I didn't snoop. I didn't need to see the messages to understand what was going on. But I took a picture of the screen with my phone before the notification disappeared. Proof. That night, she came home late again, smelling faintly of the cologne that wasn't mine. She was tired, distracted, and didn't notice me watching her from across the room. I could have confronted her then. I could have demanded an explanation, or shouted, or thrown the word cheating in her face. But I didn't. Instead, I started planning. Because if I'd learned anything in life, it was this. People remember the loud fights for a little while, but they never forget the quiet exits. The first step was to get my own life in order. I reviewed our finances, something Jenna had never cared much about, as long as the bills were paid. I made copies of important documents, checked the balances of our accounts, and quietly opened a separate account in my name only. I also started looking for a place to live. I told no one, not even my closest friends. This wasn't something I wanted to share until it was done. The second step was to gather what I needed for closure. My own closure, not hers. I didn't follow her or try to catch her in the act. I didn't want that kind of proof. I wanted the kind she couldn't talk her way out of. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched her patterns. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she had client dinners. Every Saturday afternoon, she'd go shopping for 3 hours without buying anything. I marked each one on a calendar, knowing they'd be important later. Then came the night that cemented my decision. She came home later than usual, hair slightly mussed, makeup smudged just enough to notice. I was sitting on the couch and she didn't see me at first. She walked into the kitchen, pulled out her phone, and smiled at the screen in that way I used to know so well. "Miss you already," she typed. That was it. No more doubts, no more pretending. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and when. I picked a date, 2 weeks out. Enough time to get everything in place, but soon enough that I wouldn't have to live with the act much longer. In those 2 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I smiled when she talked about work events. I wished her fun on her shopping trips. I even offered to cook dinner on the night she came home late. She thought I was oblivious. She thought she had me exactly where she wanted me, in the dark, waiting at home. What she didn't know was that I'd already packed half my things into boxes hidden in the garage and arranged for a moving truck to come while she was at work. The night before my chosen date, I stayed up late after she went to bed. I wrote her a letter, not to win her back, not to make her feel guilty, but to make sure she understood that I knew. It was short, just a few lines. "I hope he's worth it. You won't hear from me again. Take care." I left it unsigned. She wouldn't need a signature to know it was from me. The morning came quietly. She left for work with a smile and a wave. I watched her drive away, then called the moving company. By noon, the house was half empty. By 3, it was done. I left my keys on the counter next to the letter, and then I walked out the door, closing it behind me without looking back. She didn't know yet. She wouldn't know until later that evening, when she came home expecting me to be there, waiting like always. By the time she found the letter, I'd be long gone. But that was only the beginning, because the real revenge wasn't just leaving. It was what I'd set in motion after I was gone. When I closed that door for the last time, there was no dramatic music, no rush of adrenaline, no feeling of cinematic triumph. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet that sinks into your bones and tells you you've finally stepped out of something you should have left a long time ago. I didn't go far that first night, just to the apartment I'd rented under a short-term lease. It was nothing special. Bare walls, mismatched furniture, and a faint smell of fresh paint. But it was mine. Every square foot of it was free from the tension that had been in our house for months. I unpacked only what I needed, a few clothes, my laptop, a coffee mug. The rest stayed in boxes stacked neatly in the corner. Then I turned my phone off. When I powered it on the next morning, I had 12 missed calls from Jenna, 6 voicemails, 4 text messages that bounced between confused and angry. "Where are you? This isn't funny. Why are all your things gone? Call me back now." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sent one short text. "You'll figure it out." For the first 2 days, she tried the confused spouse routine. She left messages asking if something had happened, if she'd done something wrong, if we could talk about it. By day 3, the tone shifted. "So you're just going to disappear? This is childish. If you're trying to punish me, it's not going to work." I said nothing. By day 5, she stopped pretending she didn't know why I'd left. "If this is about Alex, I told you." That's as far as I read before deleting the message. While she was spiraling, I was busy making sure she felt every ripple of my absence. The joint bank account was already split. All my automatic payments, mortgage, utilities, streaming services, were canceled or transferred to her name. The credit card we'd shared? I'd paid off my portion and had my name removed. That meant she was now responsible for the balance, including the charges she'd made for work dinners and shopping trips that I knew weren't work or shopping. The car she'd been driving was leased in my name. I returned it to the dealership. She'd have to figure out her own transportation. I didn't do any of this out of spite. I did it because I wasn't going to keep funding the life she'd built without me. If she wanted Alex so badly, he could step up and provide for her. From what I'd gathered, Alex didn't have that kind of money. A week after I left, I ran into Rachel. Not the Rachel from the first story, but another friend of Jenna's. We were both at the grocery store. She spotted me first. "I heard you moved out," she said carefully. "I did. She's telling people it was sudden." "It wasn't sudden," I said. "It was just quiet. She didn't notice." Rachel looked at me for a long moment before nodding. I figured there was more to it. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. People talk, and Jenna's version of events wouldn't hold up when the timeline started to make sense to others. Meanwhile, I had one more piece of my plan in motion. the part Jenna didn't see coming. Before I left, I'd contacted her company's HR department anonymously. I didn't accuse her of anything personal. I simply reported that she had been spending company hours and resources meeting with someone who might be a client, but wasn't officially listed. Corporate HR doesn't ignore reports like that. Even without my name attached, they'd have to look into it. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I knew it wouldn't make her life easier. 2 weeks after I left, Jenna finally stopped calling. That's when the messages from mutual friends started trickling in. She's selling the house. She had to cancel her vacation plans. She and Alex aren't together anymore. The last one caught my attention. Not because I cared, but because it meant the fantasy bubble she'd been living in had popped faster than I expected. I didn't ask for details, but I didn't have to. People volunteered them. Apparently, Alex hadn't been thrilled to find out she'd lost her car, was struggling with the mortgage, and had work troubles. He lasted a month before walking away. The next time I saw Jenna in person was purely by accident. I was at a coffee shop, working on my laptop, when she walked in. She froze when she saw me. "You're actually here," she said, as if I'd been some ghost she wasn't sure was real. "I've been here," I replied calmly. "You didn't even say goodbye." "You told me once," I said, "that I needed to stop making everything about me, so I left you to make it all about you." Her face tightened. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said, standing to leave. "I just think I'm better without you." I didn't stick around for her reply. I walked out into the afternoon sun, feeling lighter than I had in years. That was the thing about my revenge. It wasn't about watching her crash and burn. It was about removing myself so completely from her life that the consequences of her choices would find her on their own, and they had. Over the next month, I got occasional updates through mutual acquaintances. The house sold at a loss. She moved into a smaller apartment. She traded her designer handbags for grocery store brand coffee, and every time I heard about another change, I thought back to the moment I found that calendar notification on her tablet, the one with Alex's name and the little heart. I'd made my choice then, and I'd never regretted it. But the plan wasn't entirely done. There was one more thing I had to do, not for revenge, but for closure. I still had the photo of her tablet screen from that morning, and I still knew Alex's email from a mutual connection. I didn't write anything dramatic. I just forwarded the photo with one line. This was the morning she told me she was working late. No threats, no insults, just the truth. I didn't care what he did with it. That wasn't my business anymore. But I knew, deep down, that honesty can be its own kind of quiet, permanent revenge. When I finally deleted her number from my phone, it felt like closing the last chapter of a book I should have stopped reading months earlier. She had made her choices. I had made mine. And mine had left me free. 3 months after I left, I barely thought about Jenna anymore. The days of checking my phone for her messages were long gone. Now, the only time her name crossed my mind was when someone else brought her up. Life had taken on a rhythm again. I'd settled into my apartment, made a habit of morning runs, and even reconnected with friends I hadn't seen much during my marriage. The quiet wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. But every now and then, a reminder of my plan's lingering effects would surface. One afternoon, I got a call from an old co-worker of Jenna's. We'd never been close, but she'd always been polite to me at company events. "Just thought you'd want to know," she said carefully. "They let Jenna go." I didn't ask for details, but she gave them anyway. Apparently, the HR investigation I'd quietly set in motion had snowballed. It turned out Jenna had been logging client meetings that didn't exist, claiming expenses that weren't business-related, and spending company hours away from the office. "She's telling people it's a misunderstanding," my caller added. "But, well, you know how that goes." I thanked her for telling me, hung up, and sat back in my chair. I hadn't expected my report to cause this much fallout, but I also hadn't lied. Everything HR found was her doing. By then, the updates about her had turned from gossip to cautionary tales. She's selling furniture to make rent. She applied for a job at a place that used to be her client. She's been quieter lately. I didn't celebrate her struggles, but I also didn't feel guilty. She'd chosen her path, and I'd simply stepped out of the way so she could walk it without me holding her up. Then, one evening, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, just a single sentence. I didn't realize she was married. It was from Alex. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Now you do." That was the end of it. No long explanations, no venting, no "you can have her" comments. He didn't respond, and I never heard from him again. About 6 months after I'd left, I ran into Jenna for the second time. It was at a small farmer's market on the edge of town. She was alone. No designer purse, no manicured nails, no effortless glow. She looked tired. For a moment, we just stood there, a few feet apart. "You look different," she said finally. "So do you," I replied. She glanced down, then back up. "I didn't think you'd actually walk away." "You didn't think I'd notice," I said. "I made a mistake." I almost laughed. "Which part? The cheating? The lying? Or thinking I'd keep paying for you to do it?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. I thought we were stronger than that." "We were," I said, "until you weren't." I left her standing there. No dramatic speech, no lingering look, just a quiet exit, the same way I'd left our house months ago. That was the thing about my revenge. It wasn't about her feeling bad in one big cinematic moment. It was about making sure she had to live with the consequences of her own decisions day after day. And from what I could see in her eyes, she already was. When I got home that day, I pulled out the small folder I'd kept from our marriage. Not because I wanted to dwell on it, but because I wanted to see something. Inside were the few pieces of proof I'd collected before I left. The photo of her tablet screen, the calendar I'd marked with her work trips, the short letter I'd left on the counter. I looked through them slowly, then slid them back into the folder, and then, for the first time, I tossed the folder into the shredder, because I didn't need it anymore. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. A mutual friend told me that Jenna had moved to another city. No one knew exactly why, but I could guess. It's hard to stay somewhere when every street holds a reminder of how you lost everything. It struck me then. In the span of a year, she'd gone from the life she'd bragged about, nice house, steady income, new romance, to starting over completely. And I hadn't had to yell, threaten, or make a scene. All I'd done was step away and let her reality catch up to her. A few weeks later, I was at a small cafe reading on my laptop when a young couple sat at the table next to mine. They were laughing, holding hands, completely wrapped up in each other. For a split second, I thought about how Jenna and I had once been like that. Before the distance, before the lies, before Alex. But instead of feeling bitterness, I felt nothing. Just a quiet acceptance that some stories don't get a happy ending together. And some endings are the happiest part. As I left the cafe, I realized something important. My revenge wasn't about punishing her. It was about reclaiming my own life without her shadow over it. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. And mine had given me something she no longer had. Freedom. Freedom from wondering where she was. Freedom from the weight of suspicion. Freedom from funding a life I wasn't a part of. I had walked away without a fight. And in doing so, I'd won a war she didn't even realize she was waging. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you do to someone else. It's about what you stop letting them do to you. And as I walked down the street, the late afternoon sun on my face, I knew I'd never go back. Not to her, not to that life, and not to the version of myself who would have stayed. That version was gone, and I was better for it.